policy. If the resources come, we invest in infrastructure and all those things and create an enabling environment for people to get jobs, either through the investments in capital investments in infrastructure development, or giving people access to funds to get into private enterprise. These are all opportunities I believe will be contained in this manifesto. And when people start being gainfully employed, they can have decent living, and they will live.
And that's it for the pulse. There's more news at myjoyonline.com. My name is Gifty Amdo-Apia. Evans Mensah, by the way, has joined me. He's leading the team that's bringing you the live coverage and the analysis of the NDC's manifesto. Evans, it's good to have you.
Good to have you, of course. And this is our live coverage of the NDC Manifesto, which is coming to live from the UPSA. We're going to be with you till it's done. We understand this is going all the way to 9. And as you can see already from the ground, my colleagues, MFR Powell, Daniel Dadzi, Parker Winston are going to be joining us with a host of guests from the UPSA as we build into this. Also joining us on the show is Imani Africa. They've been doing a lot of work analyzing these manifestos over the years. They've analyzed the NDC Manifesto of 2016 and 2012, which they came into government with. It's going to be an interesting analysis looking into the track record of these of the political party that is now launching a new manifesto for 2020. So you want to stay with us. When we return, we'll be going into some of the things you can expect to hear in this manifesto about to be launched. This is your election headquarters. And thank you very much for staying with us. This is your election headquarters. This is our coverage of the launch of the NDC Manifesto at the UPSA. Shortly, I'll be crossing over to my colleagues on the ground, MFR Powell, Daniel Dadzi, Parker Winston, who are starting by with more conversations with some of the dignitaries already arriving at the UPSA ahead of the launch as we build up into this, trying to tease what to expect. Talking about what to expect, there's been a lot already promised by John Dramani Mahama, the leader and flag bearer of the NDC, coming into the day when they launched the manifesto proper. And so what we've done is the party themselves has put together a host of these promises that they've been making already. These are the promises that we are expecting to see in actual print in the manifestos. And so pay attention to these promises you're going to be talking about, and also match it with what you actually hear from or read from the manifesto. Is it the same as was promised on the political platforms across the country, or there's slight changes in the way it's worded in a manifesto? That is going to be key. Winston Amwa is joining me to go through that. Winston, that is important, right? I mean, the point about what all these we're going to go through are things that John Mahama had been saying when he's touring the country and promising. We've heard him say. I'm always curious to know how that matches with what is in print.
Exactly, Evans. And you know, that's when we're having that conversation about what politicians say and what is in their manifesto. I expect to see these broad ideas as to how they are worded as the issue. Because, I mean, having talked about it, there's been lots of conversations about it. People have made suggestions, others have condemned it. I think that on this day, the NDC would have looked at all the suggestions, all the comments about many of the policies they've talked about already, and actually frame it to take care of all the criticisms and all the praises. So while you would have the broad idea, there might be few changes to it, just to ensure that is in touch with what people are talking about today.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we'll also be doing before we get the live coverage is going onto the ground. We have a live roaming camera around Accra. We're going to be gauging live reaction to some of these promises we've had already and people's own expectations going into the launch tonight. So stay with us. A lot to get through for you. Let's start with this. This is an interesting one. This is free primary health care for all that John Mahama has promised. When I saw this, I wonder, free primary health care. We have the National Health Insurance Scheme already, which is based on an insurance policy. We pay something through taxes, etc. I wonder how this is going to be different from that, and why this at this time. How are you going to fund it? Because it's free.
Yeah.
I mean, have they cost it? How much is it going to cost us a year? Very interesting thing to probe.
Indeed, very interesting, and it's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to this manifesto, because I mean, we've been having conversations about it, and I am looking forward to the modalities that these things are going to be achieved. I mean, it's nothing when you say I'm going to legalize and regulate Okada. How are you going to do it? But if you say free primary health care, how different is this going to be? The costing is very important.
Yeah.
How do you intend to achieve it? These are things that you expect the NDC to be talking about tonight by explaining because there's been a lot of conversations about people have come in and said, how different is this from what we're currently experiencing? There's a scheme, an insurance scheme that is supposed to be compulsory for everybody. All of us are expected to be on it. So what do they want to do different? They've been offering their own explanations, and I've said, well, you wait. We'll see what would happen on the day of the manifesto.
The details, we hope to find a bit more detail. I want to go to the next one, and this is the big one, because I remember the 2016 MPP manifesto. Change, an agenda for jobs was the theme of the manifesto. They knew then that job creation was going to be the biggest, challenge for any government, right? And so they couched the manifesto like that and put in promises that they thought. So one district, one factory, even the one village, one dam.
Yeah.
Still that, because if you can do agriculture in these villages, employs a lot more people. We are in 2020. The NDC is promising 1 million jobs. My question I ask on this is, what is the time frame for this, and how do you deliver? Key question: is it 1 million jobs that John Mahama has promised in the last few days as he's been campaigning? Is it government or public sector jobs, as in the NAPCOs and the youth employment programs that we've seen that had all ended up with scandals, right? Or this is private sector led jobs?
Okay.
Those are key things to
exactly.
examine.
But you see, when government talks about the creation of jobs, what they normally would tell you is that government has policies. So they put in place policies, and if the policies lead to job creation, the jobs have been created as a result of the government policy. So government can say, it is as a result of these policies that I put in place that has ensured the creation of this number of jobs. I mean, I'll give you a typical example, which has to do with the hunting for food and jobs. Now, they talked about the creation of over 1 million jobs. When you ask them, they tell you that, people say they cultivated this number of hectares, and you need about 4 people to cultivate a hectare. So if that is the case, then we believe that we have created this number of jobs. And that's the installation the Food and Agriculture Minister, Usufi Yakoto gave. So you ask yourself, how do you check whether indeed you are creating 1 million jobs? Do you know currently the unemployment rate in this country? Because if you look at the Ghana Statistical Service survey, in many of the instances, and in Akufo-Addo's first, the first State of the Nation address, the unemployment rate was around 10%. Okay, so it actually tells you that, look, this is the situation we're faced with. Now you have an unemployment rate around 10%. The labor survey says is around 11%. You ask yourself over the years, so if we have employed over 1 million people, how many more are unemployed? Because you're looking at people who are above the age of 15 and actually looking, for jobs.
And also the question about how our ability to even measure the jobs created is always controversial.
It's always controversial.
But there's no independent way of assessing the jobs that have been created, how job losses, those people who are out of job, those who have actually got jobs. That's a difficult area to measure. Exactly, and I mean, if you come to me and you ask me, Winston, are you working? And I say, okay. So in the last week, they ask you in the last week, have you done any paying job? And I say, I went out there and someone paid me 5 cedis. That's a job. Yeah. But the question is, after you leave, am I still working? Yeah, I mean, it's a very big debate. The quality of the job. So the end, and John Mahama is promising 1 million jobs. We'll see what he says in the manifesto. Maybe what I'm expecting is, I want to see details. How he's going to deliver this 1 million jobs. The manifesto must have some more flesh than just this broad promise that he's put forward. Now, scrap import duties on all commercial vehicles and other equipment for industrial and agricultural projects. My focus here is on all commercial vehicles coming in. I mean, I already see people bringing vehicles in and say this is for commercial purpose. When it actually clears and then you turn into the private vehicle.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an important
so when you
part.
talk about the creation of jobs, one of them could be this.
Yeah.
Now watch this carefully. The moment you say you're scrapping all import duties on equipment for industrial and agricultural projects, if that person has a bit of money, it goes back into the company. It could lead to an expansion. If there's expansion, he probably would have to employ more people. If he employs more people, then you say there's job creation. We're talking about agriculture also, because we say, every country, in our country, we say is an agrarian economy. Largely agrarian economy. So you need people to come in with a lot of, agric inputs to actually develop that sector. So if that is the case, if these people are able to bring in a lot of inputs and they pay less for it, they could bring more, they employ more, and at the end of it all, you have those jobs.
So you see a link between the 1 million jobs?
Yes, I see a link between this.
I mean, let's go to the next one that he talks, illegalize and regular Okada. We know this has been very controversial.
Yes.
A lot have been said about it. We don't even know to go into it again. But I'm waiting to see what the details say in the manifesto. There's one thing promised on the campaign platform that you're going to do, legalize Okada, explaining to us how you're going to do it to avoid the accidents. If you look at the National Road Safety Commission report, I mean, riding a motorbike, for example, is one of the leading causes of death in this country. And so how do you legalize it and make sure that it doesn't lead to more deaths is a key thing to watch today. Also, the big push. You know this. This is one of the most controversial things. $10 billion investment to develop infrastructure across the country. A lot of money. So
I've been reading Seth Tekper's piece today that talks about whether the government's decision to use a JAPA to raise money is an indication that we're there's the fiscal space is narrowing for government borrowing. And so I'm asking myself, based on how much we've borrowed this year, 2021, 2022, 2023, would we have space to be borrowing this amount of money? That's, for me, the key thing. And one of the things I'd love to know is how the Ghanaian economy can...
Where is the $10 billion going to come from?
Yes, how can the Ghanaian economy take this? Because we certainly would be borrowing. Mind you, we've borrowed so much, and we've said over the next 3-4 years, we're going through a slow phase of development as a result of COVID-19.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important point to look forward to. Free TVET education. Now, we know the specific is that this is free TVET education for senior high, second cycle, to tertiary. But my point is, free senior high school education is already there, and it covers TVET already. And so when you say you want to make it free, what exactly are you making free?
So the conversation has been about, when it comes to even free TVET at the second cycle institutions, is that those under the Ministry of Education are covered, but not all are under the Ministry of Education. So for those under the Ministry of Education, they are catered for under the free SHS program. And that's why going forward, there's a plan to bring all of them under the Ministry of Education. Once that is done, then it caters for, all those in the second cycle area. He's gone forward to talk about, technical education at the tertiary level. Again, one of the things I'd love to hear, and the famous cost element.
Yeah.
Because you see, we're not in normal times, and everything we do must be costed, and you ask yourself whether the Ghanaian economy can take this.
Yeah, I mean, that's key. I mean, see what the costing structure is for free TV. Pay all assembly members, another controversial one. He says he's going to cut back on the size of government, and then the excess amount goes to paying the assemblymen. I mean, we need to look at the specifics, though, how much he's expected to save from cutting back on the number of ministers, etc., and whether that will be enough to pay all these assembly members. And if it's not, where are you getting the rest from? Is key to what? Now, provide small and medium enterprises with tax exemptions to boost business and create more jobs. This is another area that links to the
job creation. So once you give them tax exemptions, all things being equal, once the business thrives, they're able to inject more capital into the business. Once the business expands, you need more hands. And as they sit here, you'll be creating more jobs.
That is what the theory says. Whether that happens in practice is a whole different ballgame. Whether if you give me a tax exemption, I won't necessarily make the money and sort of put it back and employ more people. I mean, you hope that will be the end result.
There's a hope, yes.
I mean, the question is, what mechanisms are you putting in this to ensure it delivers the outcome that you expect from this particular promise? I mean, we'll see whether the manifesto provides that. Of course, this is the big one, and I like what they've done with the sting, with a cross, a red cross. I mean, a red
that looks like
sword, a red sword in it. Operation Sting, fight against corruption. This is one of the areas where Joman was criticized, possibly the most, that his government and some of the people in it were corrupt under his watch. He says he's going to come with his Sting, the Operation Sting. Questions will be asked about, okay, why didn't you do this before? when you had an opportunity? Okay, and why should we believe that you can do this if you get another chance?
If there's one thing the NDC must focus on with John Mahama's flag bearer, it is this.
The corruption.
The corruption. Because like you stated, look, in the build-up to the 2016 elections, everybody, many people...
At least the perception.
Was that the NDC and John Mahama were corrupt.
Yeah.
So the perception was that John Mahama was corrupt. Now, he's coming back with Operation Sting, Fight Against Corruption. Would like to know the exact policies he's putting in place.
That will deliver this.
That will deliver this. And the question you would ask is, why didn't you do it? But of course, there's also the other argument that says, look, the man says, this is what I want to do. Listen to it. Interrogate the measures he's put in place. Don't think about what he couldn't do in the past. Maybe he's a changed man, isn't he?
Yeah, well, let's see. I mean, we'll get to hear what the ordinary folks are saying about this already before we go for the live coverage of this. And then let's look at the final one. Fully pay all depositors of the collapsed financial institutions in 2021. This has been also very controversial. We heard the president say, but we've already paid like 90 plus, some of them for the bank to pay all. I mean, for the small, microfinance and the fund managers, we're about 90, almost 100%. The rest remaining is because of a court action. So the question is, if that is true, but we've had complaints, you've done a lot of work on the morning show. People call and say, we still haven't been paid. And so there's some, issue there clearly that the NDC is tapping into.
Exactly. There are some issues there because some have said, look, even though we're paid, we're not paid in full. I mean, there are those who've called into the Sport Morning Show and said, I invested 60,000 Ghana cedis, I was paid 40,000, I invested 34,000, I was paid 20,000. So that is an issue. But just this morning, I saw a story in the Daily Graphic that says that government has released funds for the full payment of the 20 clients of 20 fund management companies that have been validated by the official liquidator. And so these ones are going to be paid in full and not, taking head cuts like we would say. So let's wait and see how it goes.
I mean, so this is one of the key ones to watch. We're going to go definitely to the grounds at UPSA. And as you can see, Daniel Dadzi is interacting with Sami Jemfi, who's the party's communications officer.
Secondary school, and you have plans of entering university, and yet you don't know where your school fees will come from. There is good news for you in this.
Want to pay the school fees for university students?
If you want jobs as a young person, sustainable jobs with decent wages, dignifying jobs, there is hope for you. And we are not just going to give you promises. We are going to show you how we are going to finance most of these promises. We are going to give you timelines. We are going to show you sectors, the sectors where the jobs are going to come from. So, like I said, this is a manifesto of the people. It will inspire hope, and it will address the socio-economic, aspirations and the hydra-headed challenges that Ghanaians are confronted.
You say Ghanaians are confronted with challenges. Your political opponents, the governing party, say we have made progress, and their manifesto shows how to protect the progress.
What progress are they talking about? What progress? Are they talking about progress in the practice of nepotism, in the practice of family and friends governance, where we are seeing our good royalties being gifted to friends, cronies, and relatives of President Akufo-Addo? Are they talking about progress in the practice of corruption, like we have seen in the unprecedented cases of corruption under President Akufo-Addo, like the Bosgate scandal, the National Lotteries Authority scandal, the Australian visa fraud scandal, and the myriads, the countless, corruption scandals we have witnessed under President Akufo-Addo? Or is it the numerous broken promises or the unprecedented hardships that Ghanaians are going through? Whether it is the cocoa farmer, the trader, the teacher, the policeman, people are suffering in this country. And so we are retrogressing. We are not making any progress. And when they say that they are making progress, they should let you know that they have lost touch with the realities in this country. And that is why they are speaking like that. But today, you are going to see President Mahama address critical issues, germane issues that affect all of us with high sense of humility, sincerity, and the fear of God, so that you can know that in Mahama you can trust, because trust matters. In all this, it's not about who has the loftiest of promises. It is about who you can trust to deliver.
Sammy Jemfi, thank you so much. National Communications Officer for the National Democratic Congress. My name is Daniel Daze, coming to you live from the forecourt of the University of Professional Studies Accra's main auditorium, where the NDC will be launching their manifesto in just a few minutes. We're speaking to a number of the dignitaries, trying to understand the thinking that went into putting together the manifesto, the kind of issues that the manifesto will address. Already, we are reliably informed that it will be captioned the People's Manifesto, Inclusive Democracy, Jobs and Happiness for All. Let me speak to the Member of Parliament for K2 South Constituency, Fifi Kwete. Mr. Kwete, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, and happy to be with you.
Yeah, and I seem to... Oh, talk to me, don't worry. I seem to be getting this issue coming up about how this manifesto is inclusive. You've listened to the people, but the question here is, are you addressing what the people, what would win you the election, or you are just putting together a broad development agenda that may not address what the people want?
I think somehow the two issues are together, because when you're truly addressing the real needs of the nation, you are invariably addressing the real concerns of the people. So you can't really do one without the other. It is true that in a country there are so many competing issues at the same time, but just like the human body, there are certain things that constitute the heart, the lungs, the vital organs. And once you're able to address those ones, the rest of the body becomes happier. So I think really that's the aim of this program, to try to touch some of those very important issues that we believe constitute the heart of the nation. And once we can take care of that, the rest of the body should be fine.
You were Minister for Agriculture, and the MPP touts its agriculture record as unprecedented. They point to the Planting for Food and Jobs program. They say they're going to expand it to planting for export and rural development. What's the NDC's response?
Our friends in the MPP are very wonderful when it comes to sloganeering and also making a lot of noise. But in terms of the real practical delivery, it's not exactly the same. We're talking about a group, for example, that as of 2016, early part of 2016-17, when they came into office, met cocoa production at almost 1 million metric tons, and 4 years into office, they are nowhere near that. They actually have taken it down systematically. They're talking about a group that made noise about all these wonderful things happening in agriculture, but check the reality on the ground in terms of the prices of foodstuff in this country today. It's much higher than it was when they came into office. So it's one thing making the noises and using the slogans. The other thing is the real reality on the ground. And NDC, that's what we do. We focus on the reality. We don't do too much of the sloganeering, but in terms of the real effect on the people, in terms of what needs to be done, as I mentioned to you, in terms of the cocoa production, for example, MPP has nowhere near come. They've not come anywhere near that.
But is it not undeniable that our growth in the agri sector in 2016 was 0.03, and in 2017 it's increased?
No, that's a fact that you got wrong again, because you see, often when people make mention of agriculture being a 0 point something, it's never happened in the history of the NDC that our agriculture has grown by anything close to zero. In fact, the last time agriculture grew anything close to that was actually during the MPP time in 2007. After that, agriculture has seen consistent growth throughout the period. Agriculture growth in 2016 stands about 3%. It's nowhere near the 0% the MPP has been talking about. And I just give a typical case of cocoa production. That itself should tell you really what significant strides that were being done.
You didn't dispute it when Dr. Bawumia put it out that the growth was 0.03 back in 2016.
No, but the fact is that if you want to spend time dealing with all the, shall I call it, the catalog of lies and deception of Dr. Bawumia, you may have no job at all to do. Because virtually everything he speaks is a lie. But it's not the case also that we did not react at all. I then was the minister of the sector, and I came out to explain clearly that what we were talking about had no basis. We explained the fact that the real production of agriculture in 2015 was actually much higher than what it is they were purporting. I told the country that the last time we had a negative growth in agriculture was during the time of the MPP in 2007, nothing to do with the NDC at all.
Thank you so much, Fifi Kwete, for joining us this afternoon. Roxanne Nelson Dafiamekpo is a member of Parliament for South Jai. He's a member of the Constitution and Legal Affairs Committee of Parliament. Mr. Dafiamekpo, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening to your viewers.
Now,
good evening to my people in South Jai, Pekik, Palik, Pevetongo.
Okay. I'm sure that you are gearing up to go back in 2020 and win the seat again. One of the key issues that came up in this administration's lifetime was the election of MMDCEs. It became quite a constitutional pickle. A section of the public liked the idea, and you are blamed by the government for not supporting it. Is the NDC's manifesto going to address this issue?
Now, we'll address this issue, but let me set the record straight on this matter. We do not decide for the government. So the government cannot blame the NDC for chickening out. They had the power to have proceeded with the process. Indeed, so much money was allocated to the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commission had put every process in place.
I'll create your indulgence that let me speak to the minority leader.
How are we?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Hey, bro. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Good to see you too. So tell me, how appropriate is this manifesto? How is it going to speak to the people of your constituency back in Tamale? And how is it going to deliver hope to them?
It will give them an assurance that Excellency John Dramani Mahama is reliable and dependable, and that Excellency John Dramani Mahama, in his bid to become president, will reflect their aspirations and needs. That Excellency John Dramani Mahama comes to the office upon hindsight, reflecting over his past as president, the current president, and will perfect those imperfections for the better of our country. In the area of infrastructure development, the NDC, we are very proud of our record, our remarkable record in infrastructure development. Even in governance, many of you in the media today, you are living in fear. It's just that you are not able to manifest it. These days, to criticize government, you are invited to the CID headquarters. That is not the unfettered fundamental freedom of expression we guaranteed under the 1992 Constitution. We will improve governance generally. We will make Parliament more transparent, more accountable, but more importantly, COVID comes in its wake with remarkable, compelling need for major public sector reforms in order that we will respond to the aspirations of the Ghanaian people. Imagine a parliament if COVID was to be extended for an additional year or two. Imagine a public sector and public schools where children in the Saito schools, unlike me and you, are children who are privileged to be in good schools, having access to Zoom. What happens to that category of students? Our manifesto will respond to that compelling need.
How are we going to look at that area, especially with COVID? We know 42,000 jobs have been lost, 115,000 businesses have been shut down. It's a huge economic crisis. What are we doing there?
Excellency John Dramani Mahama will launch the COVID Recovery Fund, which will spur the private sector to lead the employment process and lead the private sector to generate the growth of the economy for sustainable development. So be assured that this is the people's manifesto, and we are optimistic of victory. Everything points to an irresistible conclusion that we are winning the 2020 elections. God bless.
Mr. Drisu is the minority leader for Parliament, and I'll go back. Thank you very much for your patience, first of all. And
that's my leader. That's my leader, so it's important that I cede my position to him.
Yeah, so we were on the point, and I just quickly want to bring that point home. We understand that the MPP needed a 2/3 majority, which they wouldn't have had on their own. To see the assemblymen voted for on a partisan line, that's where we split hairs. DCEs, thank you, voted for. It was going to be the entire district level election on partisan lines, including assemblymen. And that is where we split hairs, and then they decided that if we can't find that consensus, they are going to try and seek for more consensus for the process. You scuttled it, basically.
No, we did not scuttle it. The government has the duty to do its proper consultation. They failed in that, and the project collapsed. So the NDC cannot be held accountable. Where we disagreed was that we were for the fact that DCEs ought to be elected for on non-partisan lines. The MPP said they wanted it on strictly partisan lines. This was the point of divergence.
So will we see this in the manifesto?
Exactly. Because we included it in our 2016 manifesto, in our 2020 manifesto, even including paying salary to assemblymen. And so that will feature.
But the Minister for Local Government has said that allowances are already paid to these assemblymen.
How are allowances paid? What is given to the assemblymen? I'm a member of my assembly, of the South 9 District Assembly. What is given to the assemblymen is sitting allowance when they attend meetings. And they're also given TNT. And so the TNT varies from the areas where they come from in the district. And so you see an assemblyman attends a general assembly meeting and he's asked to go and sign for 40 Ghana cedis. And that's an insult when the person comes from about 80 kilometers away. So we are taking a decision to pay assemblymen proper remuneration befitting their status. And that is it.
Mr. Dafiamekpo, thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure speaking with you.
Roxton Nelson Dafiamekpo is Member of Parliament for South Dai. He's a member of the Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee of Parliament. My name is Daniel Daze. We are here just outside the UPSA's main auditorium, where in a few minutes the NDC will be launching their 2020 election manifesto. We'll take you back to the studios in Kokomlemle. When we come back, we join the feed inside. Stay with us.
And thank you very much, Daniel Daze. Of course, they're on the ground with MFR Powell, Parker, and a whole host of my colleagues there, bringing you live coverage of the NDC Manifesto Launch, which is just upon us in a few minutes, scheduled to start at 6 p.m. Guess who is joining me in the studio tonight? As we say all the time, we are partnering Money Africa to bring you the most in-depth analysis of the manifestos of all the political parties. We did it with the MPP Manifesto Launch. Tonight, again, I'm delighted to say that I've been joined in the studio by the founding president of Imani Africa himself, Mr. Franklin Cudjoe. And of course, a good friend of mine, he was on the show when we did the NPP Manifesto. Star of the show, really. Dennis with he's consults for Imani Africa. Dennis, I'm grateful that you could join me.
Thank you very much.
Frankly, he's a usual suspect. He joins me as well in the studio. I want to start with brief expectations. And Franklin, today having seen your manifesto, Zimbabwe, is it? Is it Zimbabwe?
Yes, Zimbabwe.
There's Zimbabwe. I've seen Liberia.
We did Nigeria.
Nigeria as well.
And then and then Benin.
And Benin.
And these usually would be published in very good newspapers or media
in these
countries.
Yeah.
And so the manifesto has gone quite global. Don't forget, it won. You remember, manifesto was a finalist.
Was it 2016 or 2017? 2017,
was a finalist in the almost around 80 think tanks globally competed. What was called the Templeton Award.
A prestigious
John
one.
Templeton, not Franklin Templeton.
Yeah.
I needed to make that distinction.
Very important in this way, in this era.
But they are investors, by the way. And they all have foundations, by the way. But the John Templeton Foundation recognized the manifesto work as one of the most innovative approaches to exacting accountability from government. So we've just been going along, whether funded or not.
Yeah.
Because it's a flagship project. And we are very grateful for the partnership. I mean, you seem to be one of the far-seeing, media houses, and indeed, you are one of the political avatars of our time.
I wish.
Well, you don't wish. I'm just conferring on you a new award.
You have to be careful because I nearly got one of those UN awards.
We should create a new award for Evans Special Award. Oh, you did?
Nearly.
Oh, you nearly did?
Nearly got one of them.
Okay, but you are good.
I was saying by
so
grace.
That's fine. All right. Well, that's good.
So yes, I mean, so that is just to establish the reason why we decided to partner Imani when it comes to the manifesto issues, and we are delighted that they joined us.
And we started this in 2007. You remember our Uncle Danlati?
Yeah.
One of the most illustrious sons of this country. Promised at the time in the 2008 elections, promised that he was going to build an economy, mobilize internal resources to the tune of $840 billion a year. So that by the time his tenure would have run, he would have raised almost $2 trillion, which would have beat the likes of United Kingdom and indeed Australia to rate. But people would have said that was audacious. But he thought it was possible. which is a very important conversation to be had. How do we mobilize internal resources for this raft of promises that are being thrown out just every nook and cranny of this country?
You're so right, because just before you came in, we had gone through what we've assembled, put together from all the promises that John Mahama has been making on the platforms before today. And we're asking ourselves, we're expecting the meat. That was they put the bones out there. We're expecting the meat in the manifesto. Whether we see that or not is a different conversation. But what are your own expectations going into the launch of the document tonight?
Well, look, every manifesto is supposed to be a contract of sorts, and you expect that it would at the barest minimum, somehow represent the wishes of people. We've always been in this perpetual mode of trying to fly. We are saying we are always taxiing. We are trying to take off. These were terms that were used in the 90s. I'm not too sure we haven't taken off. We've taken off, but there are headwinds. And most of the headwinds are caused by ourselves, not natural. And so for me, I want to look at I'm expecting the manifesto to answer the critical questions about how to manage the economy away from the politician.
Okay.
What I mean by that is that I don't want the politician to become a Captain Planet. You see, the MPP seems to have learned its lessons. After promising 510 promises, they realized they had drastically reduced it to about 180 or so. Well, it is understandable. What it means is that a significant amount of those promises are yet to be fulfilled. So it will be foolhardy to go on another sloganeering spree. But so for me, I want to find out exactly how the politician can move away the public conversation, can move with public conversation to the point where we are giving room to the private sector, oxygen to the private sector, to be able to create wealth. I'll tell you something. In 2016, this was September 13th, 2016, when President Mahama gave highlights of the manifesto, 2016 manifesto launch. It was on September 13th. My team counted about 125 promises that we had obviously did the costing and found out that they would have needed $22 billion more to achieve 75% of those promises if they had won power. Now, if you looked at the debt profile, what it meant was that, of course, the NDC, now the question which one would have asked is, how much of that debt stock had been overtaken by the MPP? We estimate about 30 to almost 35 billion, which meant that even though the MPP did not give us any estimate of how much they would have borrowed in order to prosecute the agenda, they overshot the runway, John Mahama's runway, by about 30-something billion Ghana cedis. I think the NDC had borrowed almost 80 billion.
Almost 90 billion.
Yeah, from 38 billion in 2013, 2012 to almost 120 billion. Now we are at 250, which meant that the NDC first term, the term that John Mahama actually took as president, he added about close to 90 billion. But our good friend, center-right thinking, added almost 130 billion. So those are the conversations I want to have. I don't want any Captain Planet type of behavior. All we want to know is, how can you engineer a structured economy so that people can feel a part of, so that just under 3 weeks when there's a lockdown, we don't start scampering for more money.
Yeah. I mean,
so people must create, you see, the whole idea of building a very resilient economy, which the NDC promised, by the way, I don't know how they were going to do that, because if you look at the time they were living, the GDP was almost 3.5%, right?
That's a collapse in the GDP.
It was almost a collapse. And we estimate that inflation would have been at dizzying height if the NDC had won power. But we also said a number of the things they had wanted to do, if they had tried to offload some of them to the private sector. I mean, for God's sake, what is it with feeding people forever?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand children have to be fed, but in every manifesto, you see not just the NDC, but the MPP, there's an aggressive attempt to feed people who are not hungry. And I don't get it. You see a lot of freebies. In fact, the NDC in its 2016 manifesto made it look as if we were going back to the Nkrumah days. Well, there's some goodness in trying to revive the Nkrumahist ideology, but it must be based on science and economics.
And current realities. We're just going through it. They want to do free primary health care when they come to power? I know that's an area you've analyzed quite.
Okay, this man is going to give you the rundown. Yes. I'm just looking at the fact that the NDC. So there was a push for industrialization, freebies, and just a few things to do with the private sector, which is a misnomer. Because if you want to build a resilient economy as they promised, resilience is not built by the public sector. In fact, we instill confidence in the public sector to build a resilient economy that would have active participants who are private sector participants, who can then buy insurance against poverty, so that we don't even have to care if we have 3 square meals a day. We don't have to care who sits at the Flagstaff House, or is it Jubilee?
Jubilee.
Well, it's Jubilee.
I mean, we'll see what happens if they win.
Let me just land so that I hand everything over to this interesting young man. See, one of the pivotal, promises of the NDC was to revive Commander. I'm just saying that, having visions of the past must be predicated on not wet dreams. It was very important that when the NDC said they were going to revive Commander, we served them with data from 1970 that said that you needed at least $90 million, and you needed at least 1,000 hectare. I
remember the fight you had with the
exactly.
With the then government.
They said we were capitalists, and so we didn't like socialism. My good friend Omani Bama, and I said, Omani, well, we went to sixth form together, and I know that when it comes to money issues, it doesn't know the color of ideology. What it matters most was it practical?
Yeah.
They said, in fact, they organized the fanfare. I think there were prayers said by almost all the religious groups, including the traditionalists, just to shame us. Then 1 month after trying to revive Commander, boom blind, the thing fell apart.
Yeah, they showed us 1 bag of
there was no sugar.
The 1 bag of sugar that
yes.
They said came from.
So exactly going back to the point I made earlier, at the end of the day, this manifesto must speak to us in such a way that even though we want to have visions of the past, and the MPP must have done a bit of that as well, one district, one factory. You saw how difficult it is to implement that.
Absolutely.
Because it's not based on any serious value chain analysis.
Yeah, the reality kicked in when they started implementing it.
Much more. So for me, these are just my opening thoughts. I hope the manifesto is indeed a people's manifesto. And what does that mean, by the way? A manifesto is supposed to affect people. Unless
I think when I hear that, what they're trying to say is they explain it as, we went to the ground, and these are things that the people told us.
Oh, I see.
That we put in the manifesto. So it's not about sitting in a room.
Let me tell you a little story.
And imagining what they want.
I imagine that they have done that. Let me tell you a little story. In 2016, when our good friends in the MPP were doing One Village, One Dam, I recall that there was a gentleman who was asked on Adom FM, and it was a party activist, and asked a question. You say you do One Village, One Dam. Do you know how many villages are in the country? He said no. So do you know how many dams you want to construct? He said we are still counting. What type of dams? He said we are still thinking. How would you fund the dams? The guy went like, all right, I don't know how much you say. You see, but I feel also then. Clearly meaning that people were not asked. That's how come the NDC went and organized press conferences in dry dams to show that the dams were not proper. In any case, at the end of the day,
so it tells you, that's Franklin's initial remarks about what to expect. We'll be crossing over again to the UPSA grounds. All my colleagues are standing by with more build up into tonight's live event. I want to bring in Dennis now, and Dennis, very quickly. Generally, I know you've done a lot of number crunching on the previous manifestos for the party. I say this year's election is about track record. You have 2 candidates, both of them have had 4 years each. Or both of them are promising us new things. I mean, to believe what he will do for you in the future. Is it Nakana? Is it Kwatekwase Obama?
Kwatekwase away from
TDD. And so thank you very much for helping me out with that.
Yeah.
That particular proverb is very, very relevant in the 2020 elections. And that is why you are here, to walk us back before we move forward with the NDC. But knowing what you know, what are you expecting to hear tonight?
Okay, so good evening to your viewers. The NDC.
We're also live on Joy, by the way. We are live on Joy 99.7 FM, on Lab FM in Kumasi, affiliates across the country, and also on our many social media platforms tonight. your election headquarters. Dennis, yes.
Okay, so the NDC has titled this manifesto the People's Manifesto. So what I expect to see is the basic things that affect the daily livelihoods of the people. Because if you go to the grounds and ask people questions, they are not asking questions about the GDP. They're not asking questions about the taxes. They're not asking questions about, let's say, ports and other things. What they are asking is about health, education, poverty reduction. So and also corruption. So if you look at every barometer globally or even within the sub-region that seeks to get the views of citizens, 3 key issues that they point out are corruption, they look at poverty reduction, and how government can raise revenue to help the extremely poor population. So I want to see over time from 2012, you see that between 2012 and 2016, our corruption perception index or our score we are doing well from 45 to 48 to 47 to 43, and now we are declining from 43 to 41, 41, 41 in the past 4 years.
Yeah.
So what I want to see is that there is this operation called Sting.
Operation Sting.
What are they going to do aside the OSP, aside the Right to Information Bill? We have all of these in place to help us fight corruption. What else? What novel thing are they bringing on board? Also on poverty reduction, according to the multi-dimensional poverty index now, about 43.5% of Ghanaians are becoming poor in the areas of education, healthcare, sanitation.
43, you said?
Yeah.
That's a huge number.
Yes. And it was recently published. So I want to see strategies to help the extremely poor come out of poverty by setting them up well, helping them leverage local market opportunities, not dishing out monies to the...
You raise a very important point. And one of the things we're trying to do with the Manifesto Tracker is to push the parties to be outcome-oriented in what they promise. So, for example, the statistics you give, which of the parties is thinking, all these raft of promises I'm promising you in education, I intend that in 1-2 years, I want to reduce the 43% to 20. And there must be a target there set to achieve that outcome. You don't hear our manifestos doing that necessarily. It's just to simply throw promises out there and not link to the real outcomes that you can measure.
So that's what we, as a MANI, that's why we have our critical analysis program, where we seek to analyze the feasibility and then looking at how governments are going to go around it, whether it is measurable. So you look at the policy that you are directing towards poverty reduction. In, let's say, 4 years, what are the expected impacts that we should see? So I want to see the manifesto touch on these things, and I want to see them, and as Mr. Franklin said, look at how we can help businesses. Businesses revive, or we want to revamp our private sector so that we can tax them. Now we are seeing a lot of both manifestos, or if you look at the highlights, they're all touching on freebies to businesses, trying to help businesses. But as we are doing that, we should be mindful that government revenue is declining. And that as you are giving those freebies, how do you intend to also finance some social projects, some capital project that will be very relevant? So I want to see issues on corruption, poverty reduction, and also on revenue generation.
Frankly, you had something.
Just a quick point about the issue you raised about coherence.
Yes.
You see, so you can throw all kinds of things into the air. Would focus on technical vocational education. The NDC promised that. Every party has been promising that. In fact, the NDC said they were going to dedicate the deputy ministerial position
to that
for TVET. They did. Now, what have we had so far? We've had a lot of grammar schooling, but now there's also focus because President Nanado just outdoor the foundry. Right? These bits and pieces are useful. The point, though, is that the question you asked is, in the far-seeing world, what they do is that they calculate that if I spend X amount on technical vocational students and I did a foundry where they will get additional skills, it will add X% to the economy. So that I don't have to start thinking about giving them housing rent.
Absolutely.
So I'm thinking about the fact that these people have skills they've built because we've invested in them, and the skills are connected to the modern economy so that they can get jobs or create jobs quickly, and then whatever interventions you want to make are short-termist. We cannot perpetually live on the premise that people are hungry and the government must be feeding them all the time. Governments are not for the Christmas. So the question you asked about how do you design your output-based manifesto to link with the very growth post. And I recall what was his name. Was it Cameroon? Cameroon in one of his manifesto outdooring about the government and the business of government did a PowerPoint presentation, and did the connections. They could tell you this is where we are getting to, and they measure these things.
Yeah.
If you don't measure, that's when you say you want to build 110, you say Agenda 111.
Yeah, the hospitals and the clinics across the
yes,
country.
which is useful. But you mentioned a big figure like 100 billion to do so. Exactly what will be the added benefit after you've done this investment?
I want to quickly do something that you touched on, and frankly also about reflecting the aspirations and needs of people, right? Yeah. My colleague Manuel is stationed somewhere around the ministry right now. This is live. We are, thankfully to the NDC, we've heard a lot of the promises already. So we're going to be debating. This is expectations, right? Whether what they've heard already really meets the expectations, and he's been interacting with a few of them. Manuel joins me. Hello, Manuel. I could see that you've pretty been having a conversation with people in that particular enclave. What is the sense you're getting before we get to hear the specifics about all the things that Jemima has said already? Are people reacting to this, and in what way specifically?
Yes, indeed, Evans. The jury is out really on the NDC's manifesto. The snipers that they've been putting out before the launch of the manifesto itself has got people talking. In fact, people are reacting to it. Indeed, about issues of bread and butter, how they're going to provide an alternative to the current NPP government and essentially provide a compelling, as it were, option for electorates, to choose from. And so I've been trying to speak to a few of the people here in the Central Business District, really around the ministries area, and I'm going to get a bit closer to them and try to get them to tell you, for themselves, really, what they think of the promises that they've had thus far and whether or not it's going to inform their choice come December 7. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming through to speak to me. Maybe I want to start with you, my very good friend. You've heard a number of things that the NDC is promising to do if it wins power in December. I don't know what specifically, strikes a chord for you, but tell me a bit of the things that you've heard and how you're reacting to them.
Thank you for this opportunity as well. Myself, currently, I can't really tell the couple of promises that they have put in place. Specifically, I can't really tell. But then I've heard that Okada people will be put on track to work effectively. And that is a nice idea, though. But then kindly ask those Okada people online to work. I think they have to be trained very well, specialized, so that they can work as effectively. And secondly, my personal problem that I have with the previous government and even current government is that my problem is a lot of policies and a lot of things that has been done in the pipeline. It's my wish that when they come to power, at least those projects that have been neglected in bushes and stuff, they need to continue those projects as well. They need not to neglect or abandon certain stuffs in the far politics and neglect it. But all these things worth for money as well. Yeah.
Great. So Evans, you're hearing him tell me about his impressions about abandoned projects. He mentions the bushes. I think he's referring to a few of the projects which were started by previous governments, not only the Mahama administration, but governments that have come in time past that have been abandoned. He wants them to be completed. And for him, If the NDC, I beg your pardon, is going to promise to complete the projects, then maybe they are going to get his vote. And so completion of abandoned projects sits tall on his list. But let me find out from you. He's mentioning completion of abandoned projects. But we've heard the NDC say that they are going to do what they call the big push. $10 billion in infrastructure and hospitals, schools, and so on and so forth. Does this meet your demands as an electorate?
As a Ghanaian, I hope that this dream comes true, because the MPP, when they came to power, also brought a big push, but along the line, the money did not come. And so since the Sino Hydro project is ongoing and we are benefiting from it, it's a good news. I, for one, will wish that their premium healthcare plan works. If it works, then it means that all Ghanaians will have access to free healthcare. Currently, we are on health insurance, and trust you me, it's not everybody who can even pay to subscribe to it. Many of the people who are in the villages, these things that we are talking about, they know nothing of.
That's true.
This free SHS is a noble and a good idea. In fact, it is long overdue. we should have access to education for free. Because most of the people, government workers, are paying taxes.
Well, NDC says that it will maintain the free SHS and abolish the double track. It's going to build more schools so that it can accommodate the excess numbers of the students for which reason we are having double track.
I, for one, will not go for the rhetorics. I want to see something on the ground. To start with, every new thing comes with its own genuine problems. I genuinely don't believe that the MPP thought that there will be a mad rush to free SHS, and the double track came on. For them, they've been able to manage it to some extent. If in case NDC should come to power and they are able to abolish it, it will be a plus for Ghana. We should move away from the fact that this political party is...
But do you trust that the NDC can abolish it?
For sure, I know. I mean, once it's a political promise, free SHS is a political promise. And so they are... Most of the parties will do it at the neglect and expense of other developmental projects. So fulfilling it will not be a big deal for the NDC. That one I know. Since MDC...
But what will be the implications of fulfilling such a promise? Currently, you have a deficit in terms of space in the senior high schools and so on. The reason you're having the double track system. So if, like you're saying, it's a political promise and indeed they are going to fulfill it, what will happen to the excess numbers that you're having?
In fact, there are uncompleted school buildings. What I have heard and what I have seen is that most of the E-blocks are a little bit far from the main townships, and that is the problem, that the MPP were not ready to, complete the E-blocks. But if, for instance, they are able and put buses that can traffic the school kids from the E-blocks to the main classroom blocks, the double track system will be over and it will be gone for good. And so it's just the wish and then the desire, political desire to do one thing or the other, choosing that it will benefit the citizenry.
Great. I'll come back to you for us to talk. But on issues of bread and butter, Amelia, you are joining us for the conversation. Great. Kachi, mame, what exactly? Who per se NDC anything?
Mopacho NDC party no. Omo promise ni passe, omo be yes say, but MPP 4G no promise ni too much. Omo ntimi ya ade ba akokra. E ma ya hu chire ya tisika be dia ndisika. So yo ya pese yan ka chire aban ni say this year on pe baby njina ya ntimi nto abama no. Me kura mpa ma wo mienu me kola na nyina me ntimi hwe omo kura bie. Me mana konof. Arentina Ghana obetima dadai no wan ya ade na amaye. And now him say ya sana yedi koto abama no onko abusia
for why free SHS
mo pacho mama kasa we free education president Ben eba Ghana no ma school for koba no we transfer no we transfer ya who president in this Ghana now omo yes ade no so ya pacho bebre so ya pa no cho ya de nyam kupon pa no cho on pe bebi ntena se na John Ramani mama onje akudwan no onko ne nim because John Mama one promise here say obey we e wonu kuma na oji president no ye but Nana Akufo-Addo wa ma ya promise wa timi nhwe e wo this Ghana. Second ne wo nye MPP ni na wo pe bibi wo ana agima omo ma oda wo ya school ni krampo na wa pass wo exam. No matter how it is omo timi mfa wa agima just omo fa MPP fo no e ba na say na Ghana say sa. So
Evans, you're hearing Amelia here telling me her own, impressions about the ruling government. She's making points about having been sidelined, and he says that she's saying that the NPP government only create.
So we lost audio there to my colleague Manuel, who is standing at the Accra Central Business District, interacting with folks there ahead of the launch of the NDC Manifesto. We saw there, in essence, the views expressed on a host of issues, people's expectations. This is an NDC Manifesto launch, but as you can see, the debate of people randomly passing by. You watch this on the Joynews channel, approaching him and wanting to have a conversation about the key issues about political party promises. I want to go back to my colleague if the light it's still not back yet, but you should see the picture. Standing in the middle of the Accra Central Business District, people just coming to him to express their thoughts. Dennis, I know you were talking earlier about the people's sort of reflecting the people's needs and aspirations. You get a sense about where people are. People are either disillusioned, or they have a certain expectation of the political parties themselves. Manuel, I'm told, is back. His feed is back with the sound that we could hear him on. Manuel, yes, more of these bits from the folks you are talking to from the Central Business District.
Great. So, Evans, well, before we lost audio, one of the ladies was telling me that it's a family and friends government that is being run by the NPP. But this lady comes through and says that, you know what, everywhere in Accra, you may think so, but across the country, there is enough evidence across the country to show that there's at least some sort of even distribution of the national cake for everybody to get a piece of. I think some more people are getting closer. In fact, the conversation is getting interesting here at the Central Business District. Mommy, also person can be also NDC manifesto. Then now, they are saying now who person who. NDC for no. Mama media obano. Media baby ani wa ba mamiska. Ababi mamiska. But say me ye juma say the juma no kono. Ono na me hu say aban we oya ade. Mama Bano, Miss Sumi watch me to conjure 37. You better for the past 6 o'clock, about 12 o'clock, me to a dear class 7 million, 10 million. But now I could find the Bano, Miss watch if it had a pamic hotel. Fitiano Paco doing you me to a dear 1 million. And Tima who say, Obi Waho, now or ye, Jumana, eh? One and yes, car on Uber Mammy, appear to me more this car, but said the Abaya Crono Bay, also Tombi, Bianto, who never been found Shawumba. Sauti here. Now, two so Mamma may catch us or Beba, young man, yet Raquanuso, no Basso or Boye. Nas and yes, sir, or Basso Bessa Subway, if you know Mubedi, or no dear young go to man. If you say, Ujira Glaswa, a man with the bread, Mukano said they are by Sister Munyaman when you don't move go to man, and it's all bar on your Nadu say, yeah, man, I have good panuso, and young ever to make market no extra. Yeah, you go up until you just with your more work and market. Great, so Evans, where say, yeah, man, I have good panuso. So about the Abuaya, yes, we have the Abuano. So Evans, generally bread and butter issues, like I mentioned earlier. This lady here is telling me about, you know, the use of task force to force market women out of the spots where they sell. She is calling on the former president, John Dramani Mahama, to, as a matter of urgency, make preparations to accommodate all market women in spaces, not only in the market, in spaces that will be available for them. Great. I'll be wrapping up very shortly and handing over to you, Evans, in the studio. But let me quickly speak to this gentleman.
Oh, me, I am a passport office. Most my say Okada account. Because this every year piano. It is a Okada Jumano a year.
So Evans, I'm told that we have to come back into the studio immediately. But Evans, generally, I'm sure you're getting the impression of what the feeling is like ahead of the launch of the NDC's manifesto this evening. So from the Central Business District here in Accra, my name is Manuel Kranti for Joynews. Evans, over to you.
Very much for that. Just a sense of what people, ordinary people, are thinking ahead of the launch of the NDC manifesto. The last woman there talked about what she wants to be done for informal sector traders who sell along the streets. And I wonder whether the NDC has anything in the manifesto yet to be launched targeting that sector of the economy, because, you know, a large chunk of us, our mothers, are traders. And she says that is what she's expecting to hear in the manifesto. As you can see in the background there, the venue is now prepped and ready for the launch of the NDC manifesto. You see people seated with all COVID-19 protocols observed. We have John Mahama, who is already seated, and we're having the party representatives about to set us off into the official launch of the manifesto for the NDC for the 2020 elections. We'll be crossing over live shortly to the ground there as the program gets underway. I see that prayers are now just about being said, and so you want to join us. We're going to be here with you until this is over. I want to come to the studio to you, Dennis. Just before we went to the Central Business District, you were talking about people's, just reflecting people's needs. Yeah. The views that you had there, very passionate views expressed, some of them very essential points made, and I wonder whether the parties are paying attention, at least the NDC that is about to do this, is paying attention to some of these things in couching your manifesto.
Yeah, I'm sure they would, and if you look at some aspect of the manifesto, it may reflect some of these things, especially looking at programs that target the informal sector. In our retail space, about 90% of the retail space is covered by the informal sector. One of the major needs is access to credit, access to a much bigger market, and also access to proper facilities to display their goods. So what they should focus rather in the manifesto is, how do I create a conducive business for these people to have access to cheaper credit, access to a very broad market, access to the right people so they can sell, then I can tax them. So when people can sell, make income, and you tax them and you can invest in capital projects, they won't have a problem. But when these manifestos are focused on meeting the outputs, meeting the economic indicators, and it doesn't touch the real or the basic life of the people, then you are taking us nowhere. Okay. So that's what I want to see. If it is a people's manifesto,
it must reflect. It must reflect on poverty reduction. Quickly, let's go to the NDC has a track record, right? Yes. I mean, just before we cross over, you've done a lot of work in terms of analyzing the track record that they come to this particular elections with. Let's look at 2013 to what? 2016. They came into power with a manifesto, governed with that for 4 years. How did they perform? Just before we cross over to here.
Okay, so just a quick one on, let's say, the economy. Sure. So the NDC in 2012, like the 2012 manifesto, let's say starting in 2013, they promised that they were going to increase the GDP from where it was. But however, at the end of 2015, or in our assessment, GDP had even declined from 14.8 in 2011 to 3.5.
Okay, that's an economy. That's a big one.
Yes. Okay. Sharp decline. What that means is that businesses will be folding up. Dramatic fall.
In our history.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and interestingly, this NDC 2011 had the fastest growing economy in the world.
Yes,
right? Because in 2011,
of the discovery of oil.
Because of the discovery of oil. Oh, yeah. And then in 2012, you say in your manifesto, they even promised to do better?
They promised to do better.
I see.
However, by the end of 2016, our overall GDP was around 3.5%.
Okay.
And debt to GDP ratio was around 72%. And also inflation was double digits, even around 14.8%. If you look at the fiscal deficit, with compliance to IMF regulations, it was around 8.7%. With non-compliance, it was around 10.7%. And much of this increase in fiscal and discipline was getting closer to the elections. Yeah, so on the economy, the NDC did not really do well in terms of putting in the right fiscal discipline, managing the economy, raising revenue to ensure that the ordinary business people are seeing much growth. And when GDP declined, for the sake of our viewers, when there's a dramatic decline, it means that businesses are not producing well, or let's say their productive capacity has been declined. It means that they are either folding up, they are downsizing, or they are not making enough production, enough income. You understand? So that is one track record when it comes to the NDC in the
final
economy,
score they got was 43% on the economy.
Under the economy, yeah.
Because the NDC, the NPP had been doing 54.4% as of 2019 by the same Imani scale on the economy.
Yeah.
I see. So that is their performance on the economy.
On the economy.
As against what they promised and what they delivered.
Yes.
Okay.
But they also say a lot of headwinds came their way.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter, the manifesto typically does not, well, it will take into consideration some of this stuff. But they did like single spine, they shouldn't have done single spine fully. All these things threw the economy out of gear.
Okay.
Power outages.
Power outages also became a big issue. That the longest running that we've had. Stay with me.